Hello everyone and welcome to my first ever game review. In this video we will take a look at Star Wars Squadrons and point out all of the goods and all of the bads. So let's not waste any more time and jump right into the first part of Squadrons, which is of course the story mode. So when you first log into Squadrons, you'll be forced to play the prologue of the story mode, which takes place right after the destruction of Alderaan. This prologue mission is basically a tutorial, learning you the basics of flying, targeting and shooting, while also giving you an interesting story to be distracted by while doing so. After you have completed the mission, you are free to dive into multiplayer, which is not something I would recommend, as this game has a very steep learning curve and you can still learn a lot by playing the rest of the story mode, which, let's not forget, is still called a story mode, so it's not just a tutorial. There actually is a pretty decent Star Wars story to be told here. After the prologue, the story continues after the Battle of Endor, so basically after Return of the Jedi and before the Mandalorian series. During this story, you'll be flying as two pilots. One of them flies for the Empire and the other for the Rebellion, which is now called the New Republic. You perform basic missions with your squad during this campaign, where you complete simple objectives. Protect this ship, destroy that ship, take out that section of the station, scan this object, destroy enemy fighters, you know, that kind of stuff. Sounds pretty simple, but it's actually quite difficult if you choose to play on the higher difficulty settings, which I recommend because then the transition into multiplayer will be less of a slap in the face. Take note, I say less of a slap, you will still get hit pretty hard by the difficulty of Squadrons multiplayer, but I will touch on that later. So, destroying and defending objects doesn't really sound like the best concept for a great story, but Squadrons manages to recover pretty well from that with its great characters. There's a nice rivalry between the two commanders of the Republic and the Empire. They actually used to work together at some point, but now they are on the opposite side of the war, and this eventually becomes quite personal. Furthermore, this game is not called Squadrons for no reason. You actually fly with your squadron on these missions. And no, your squadron isn't just existing of bots. No, these are fully fledged out characters where you learn more about when time goes on. The flattest character of the story is actually yourself, as your pilot doesn't actually really speak. In conversations, he or she, depending on which gender you chose for your characters, is just being talked to. The only times I have heard my character speak was in their starfighters, where they could only say things like affirmative, copy or I'm hit. Granted to them, they also say some other things from time to time, but it's very rare. After about 15 missions, the story ends in a satisfying but pretty open way, and it also does that quite abruptly. But it shouldn't have continued any longer than it did, as it would probably have gotten boring if it would have gone on for longer. I also think this is the best way they could have ended the story, as it could have ended more abruptly and less satisfying. So all in all, it's a pretty decent story, but I wouldn't say you should buy this game just for the story, as it isn't that good. So now that the story mode is out of the way, let's talk about the core gameplay of Squadrons, which is the multiplayer. There are three modes: Fleet Battles, Dogfight, and Fleet Battles vs AI, which is Fleet Battles without human opponents, so we will just skip that one in this review. So when you start off with multiplayer, the ability to immediately play Fleet Battles should be locked, as you first need to gain some experience by playing Dogfight. Dogfight is just a 5v5 deathmatch. The first team with 30 kills wins. It is literally that simple. There are some health pickups across the maps, but that is literally everything. Which is good, because getting into a dogfight after playing the campaign is just a huge slap in the face. I am not kidding when I say that the learning curve of Squadrons is really steep. And this comes from someone who has played a flying game or two just a couple years back. Every button on your controller has a function, with no exceptions. You need to fly the thing, shoot at other things, manage your power levels, throttle, boost, shields, the focus where your shield is. Oh, and don't forget to keep an eye out for rockets chasing you, so that you can dodge them or use your countermeasures. You also have rockets yourself, so don't forget to fire them while we're at it. The gameplay of Squadrons is very deep and engaging, so starting out with a simple deathmatch I think is a good thing. Everything that I just mentioned is a lot of work to fly with. And then I haven't even talked about the different classes of ships where you have to get used to, all with a different playstyle and interior. You need to learn how to fly all 4 classes and 8 ships in the game, as they all are just a bit different from each other. You have the all-around fighter, the fast but fragile interceptor, the slow but hard-hitting bomber, and the weak but supportive support ships. All in all, there's a lot to learn here, but luckily it's all pretty well balanced. The only other thing for us to discuss here is the flagship game mode of Squadrons, which is of course fleet battles. In fleet battles, you need to take down the enemy's capital ship to win. Your team exists out of you and 4 other players, backed up by some bots, against 5 enemy players who are also backed up by bots. You start off with a simple dogfight in the middle of the map, and every kill gives your team morale. When your morale bar is full, you go on the offensive. This means that one team attacks the flagship support ships, while the other team tries to defend them. After the support ships are down, you can attack the flagship. And when that ship is down, you either win or lose, depending on which side you are on. It is important not to die a lot, as dying gives your enemy morale to maybe launch a counter-attack. This way, the battle switches from attacking and defending until one of the capital ships is down. These game modes are fun, but in my opinion also not that fun. The matchmaking can still be unbalanced, which in an ultra-competitive game like Squadrons can be a bit of a disaster, because as a casual player you don't want to get destroyed by one of the hardcore flight simulator players that will inevitably play a game like this. I've honestly had not a lot of close matches. Most of the time you win or lose by quite some margin, but when it's close, it can be very exciting indeed. In terms of long-term viability, I think Squadrons is pretty poor actually. There are only 6 maps to play on, and there is not much variety in gameplay. Furthermore, the progression is limited to simply leveling up, unlocking ship's parts, and ship and pilot cosmetics. The customization options are pretty cool. You can customize your ship in a lot of ways, but to me personally, it somehow barely keeps me motivated to play, which is not a problem I had with Battlefront 2. Which brings me on to the last thing before I end this video. EA pulled the support on Battlefront 2 at the end of April, and since that moment, Star Wars gamers have not had any new content until Squadrons. This inevitably makes Squadrons the successor of Battlefront 2 for a lot of gamers, which is something Squadrons is not able to fulfill, as it's just not that type of game. It is a game for a very niche audience, the Star Wars pilot gamers, and that is not the most attractive part of Star Wars for most people, as I am not even playing this game for a month and I am already wishing for the next Battlefront, if that will even happen at some point. EA promised us to double down on Star Wars games, but meanwhile stopped support on a game that was riding on an all-time high and releases a $40 game a half a year later, which doesn't fulfill the need for a new Star Wars game under the fans, as this game has only kept us busy for a month and we're already bored of it. And with nothing from EA on the horizon apart from a Jedi Fallen Order sequel, we still need to wait a couple of years for, the future of Star Wars games is looking pretty bleak from my point of view. But hey, we still have LEGO Star Wars The Skywalker Saga to look forward to, but if you don't like LEGO, well then rest in peace. So in conclusion, Star Wars Squadrons is a fun new flight simulator Star Wars game that takes place right after the original trilogy. The gameplay is solid and I have not experienced any bugs, although I have heard that other people have, but those problems should be fixed by now. The story mode is decent with the exceptional depth from the characters standing out the most. The multiplayer is also good, but can feel a bit unfair a lot of times and is pretty repetitive. More game modes and maps would have helped with this. Progression is good, you have a lot of things to customize, but it somehow doesn't motivate me personally to keep playing and grind for it. All in all, Squadrons is a good game, and you get a lot for the $40 or euros or whatever you paid for it. But personally, Squadrons does not seem to be able to grab my attention for longer than an hour after I finish the story. I only play this game so that I can play it with my friends, and even then, the game only entertains us for 1 hour, while Battlefront 2 could entertain us for multiple hours a day. Because of this, I can only give Squadrons a 7 out of 10. Good game, decent story, not enough motivation to keep playing in the long term. So before I go, a quick editor's note. Just when I finished recording my voice, it became known that Squadrons would get 2 updates, which is great news. We will get 1 new map, we will get 2 new starfighters, and we will get private matches, and we can change game rules in those private matches. So less damage for the capital ships, everyone in the interceptor or bomber or whatever. It gives the game a longer life. It truly does. So this is kind of, well, I just announced my concerns that this game doesn't entertain us long enough. But maybe that will be different with these 2 updates. Maybe it will entertain us for 2 more months to come, or maybe for another year to come. We'll have to wait and see. At this moment, still a 7, but maybe over 2 months, maybe over 3 months, an 8, or maybe still a 7. Who knows? We'll see. Thank you so much for watching the video all the way to the end. It is very much appreciated. If you enjoyed, then consider liking the video and subscribe if you want to be notified when I upload a new video. May the force be with you and have a great day.